Hi, welcome back to Friend Crush. I am your host, Amber Akila. This is a podcast where I talk about things and stuff and whatever I feel like. And I'm coming to you live from my bed. It's so hot in Australia. And today's episode is going to be final part of friend breakups for now, I think. I'm really sorry that it took me so long to finish this series, but I don't know, like I would record it and then I would listen to it and then I would think about it more and feel like I missed something. And that's like the blessing and the curse of doing a podcast, is that you can kind of just share your thoughts as you have them. But then my like perspective and ideas are constantly changing. So then I feel like, oh my God, I have to update everything according to how I'm currently feeling if I've decided that I feel differently. But, I think I've come into acceptance that just because I felt a type of way at one stage doesn't mean I have to be defined by that at all, because I'm allowed to learn more and change how I see the world and continue developing. Anyway, I will discuss this in another episode. But today, final thoughts on friend breakups. So we talked about how usually it comes about from sort of like a misalignment of values and circumstance. I interrupted the series with an episode on what love actually means, and in the context of practicing love and not just falling in love or feeling love. So I think the foundation of any healthy relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, it's about this concept of love, and love being the will to extend oneself for the purpose of one or another person's spiritual growth. And I think the crux of a friend breakup versus just like a regular disagreement or conflict in a friendship is that one or both parties is no longer practicing love in that relationship. And I think that's okay, like that's completely normal, but it doesn't make it any less heartbreaking when we have to go through a friend breakup. It doesn't make it any easier necessarily to kind of have to let go of a person that you shared a lot of memories or time with. Anyway, then we talked about confronting versus ghosting. And when I think about when I think about previous friend breakups that I've been in, I think like even if you try to I feel like it's not a real friend breakup if you don't confront it head on. Actually, I don't know. It's hard to say, like, because sometimes when you're involved in like in a social group and like two people in the group have a falling out, you're kind of going through a friend breakup indirectly through the words of other people, which I think is like a really shit way to go about a friend breakup, because neither party is really taking responsibility, and then you're just kind of prolonging this feeling of awkwardness and resentment without any real closure. And even though closure is kind of like an illusion and something that you have to give yourself, not receive from other people, if you're able to have a conversation with somebody about why your friendship is no longer working, or how you have been done wrong, or how you've done someone else wrong and taking responsibility for it, I don't know. I feel like you just kind of subconsciously waste energy wondering and questioning whether or not you made the right decision or not, because you haven't actually spoken directly to the person. So I think if it's a situation where you both kind of like drift apart and then maybe you leave space to come together at another stage, that's not so much a friend breakup, just like a space that exists in a friendship, which I think is totally normal. And usually think when you're younger, you take it much more personally when another person's circumstances change and then you don't feel as close to them anymore. But the more space that you allow in that friendship for that other person to do whatever they need to do independently of you, the easier it will be for you guys to come back together again. It's like being able to accept the other person for their circumstances and what they're going through and not have it affect you, not take it personally, and just be able to sit back and support that person from a distance if you need to. I think that is, in my experience, like a very healthy dynamic in friendships, especially as you get older, because you're just not spending as much time with people the way that you are when you're in school or in college. Like everybody has to kind of go off in their own direction and discover themselves. And if you really care about and love your friend, then you'll give them the space to do that and allow your friendship to still exist, and take a new form instead of like maybe one where you would speak every single day or see each other every week. So yeah, that is more like a friendship drift. And then I think a real friend breakup usually involves some kind of confrontation. So like even when I've tried to just let a friendship drift, usually the other person is like, and to my own fault, I'm not good at telling people to their face like this isn't working for me, because sometimes I would prefer to allow for that space to be there and maybe for each of us to, let any feelings of conflict just kind of pass and come together again. But, not everybody thinks that way, obviously, and I can't expect anybody to think that either. So usually, yeah, I don't know. I guess also like my problem is that sometimes I just unfollow people on Instagram, which I will take responsibility for. But I personally do not place that much value on like people that I'm actually close with and whether or not we engage with each other on social media, because the relationships that you have on social media and your real life relationships should be separate things. And sometimes they cross over, like, yeah, obviously you follow your close friends on Instagram, whatever. But sometimes like you don't want to, I don't know, it's just not that deep. Like if your friendship cannot handle a mutual unfollowing, then maybe you're just not that close. And because when I was younger, like I had a lot of friends who use the internet in a completely different way to me, they would straight up just be like, Amber, I'm unfollowing you on Instagram because you're annoying. But I still love you and whatever, let's catch up next weekend. And I'd be like, okay, cool. So like I don't take that as personally, but I guess I understand how other people can take it really personally, and that kind of shows a rift in values for me when that kind of thinking is being exposed with another person. Because when we go back to the beginning of friend breakups, like this misalignment of values, and it's like if you care so much about how our friendship appears on the internet and not how we actually engage with each other offline or without the view of other people who don't know us, then I just feel like we're on different pages of life, and the closeness in our friendship that we maybe thought that we had or thought that we wanted is actually not achievable, and that's okay. But yeah, that is always really awkward. And I think after thinking about friend breakups this way, I have much better perspective on how I would possibly handle this in future. But I think I'm pretty lucky now that most of my close friends and I, like, we don't really approach our friendships with ego, like we like an ego battle towards each other. I think that's also a really toxic, that's like poison to your relationships when people's egos get in the way of being able to connect with each other on like a personal level. So I think I've become much more aware of that as I've gotten older, because I've become more aware of it within myself, and I can just kind of distance myself from anybody that is trying to engage with me in that way. So That's that on that. So, what can we learn from friend breakups? I think one thing that I have learnt this year that has been game changing for me, and it is quite basic, but I don't know why, like, just this idea hasn't been like properly ingrained in my mind, is that your feelings are felt in your body and your thoughts are in your head. So I think like the way that we live now, we're very much in our head about everything, and we think that our feelings and our thoughts define us, and whatever we think and feel is reality. But ultimately, we all live in our own reality, and everybody's perspective is different. Everybody is a combination of different experiences and values and interests and whatever. And I think when you're in a friendship or a relationship, in a close friendship or relationship, what you're doing when you love each other and you're practicing love in terms of extending oneself for another spiritual growth is you're kind of creating a shared reality. And sometimes something happens to one or both parties and your reality changes. What you contribute to this shared reality changes, or some external force has changed the way that this relationship exists. And that brings up certain feelings and certain thoughts. And what I've learned from my friend breakups is those thoughts and feelings that come up that usually are like not particularly comfortable to have to experience, they provide information on things that I need to work on within myself. So, as sad as a friend breakup can be sometimes, and also necessary, you still have a lot of things that you can take away from it if you let yourself really sit in the discomfort of the feelings that you have when you go through it. Because you don't have to just always put on a brave face and think, oh, fuck that, that's over, blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe you can do that just for the benefit of other people or whatever. But in your own time, I think it's really important whenever you go through a friend breakup or any type of breakup to think about the feelings that were really triggered in you, the thought spirals that you maybe went through, and ask yourself, what is something that I can learn from this that I can take into the next chapter of my life, take in the next step, and how can I, not or avoid or better manage another situation like this. Because, like I said before, the universe gives you the same lesson over and over again until you learn it. And that is something that has really rung true for me this year, because I've had a lot of full circle moments with certain situations or certain people. And it's like, okay, I can do what I did 3 years ago or what I would usually do, or I can take a step back and think about how I can manage the situation so that I am minimizing the damage to myself and, maybe this other person. But you don't really owe it to anybody else as much as you do to yourself to just like try to live a peaceful and conscious life with intention. So, for example, I talk about like how a lot of friendships, we kind of cling on to them because they provide the illusion of access to something that we don't think that we have. So if you're friends with a like person that you met when you were both partying a lot during college, and then you decide that you care more about work and living a healthy lifestyle, they're still living in their party state, and the friendship isn't really working, and you kind of need to like go your separate ways just for a bit or maybe forever if the behavior or the relationships become really toxic. So maybe you're like clinging on to this friendship because you think that you realize that without association with this person, you feel like you're not fun anymore, because when you were friends with them, you always partied, you had so much fun. Now you feel like you're prioritizing your health and your job, and on the rare occasion that you do go out with this person, you still feel like you're fun, etc. And then if that person's not in your life anymore, maybe you're suddenly going to feel really boring and like you no longer have access to the fun side of you or the party side of you. But in that realization and awareness and that maybe not so productive thought spiral, I think you can pull yourself out of it and think to yourself, okay, well, even if I'm not friends with that person, I can still nurture the fun part of me that enjoys partying, etc. It's just something that I've chosen not to engage with because my priorities have been elsewhere. But at any time, if I want to go out and have fun, I can still do that without the burden of this toxic friendship. And I think that can apply across anything. Like if it's being friends with somebody who has a really cool job and you think subconsciously that being associated with them makes you cool. But I think the main takeaway that we have whenever we're faced with conflict in life is that it's really important to cultivate the things that you want for yourself and not rely on external things to define you, because you have no control over those external things. Any minute, all of those things could disappear. And what are you left with? You need to be happy with the part of you that's left or that remains stable amongst an unstable, unpredictable society. If we've learned anything in 2020, these are unpredictable, unprecedented times. And even when we think we're in control, like pre-2020, when everything seems to be going okay, you feel like there's certainty in your life. This year has shown you that there is no certainty for anything. It can all just disappear. And I think the main takeaway that I've had is, okay, even if I'm not able to see my friends every week in Shanghai and I can't go to Hot Pot every week and I can't DJ and work the way that I used to, I can still exist without those things. Having those things is great, but not having those things the way that I would like to doesn't make me less valuable as a person. The same way that being associated with a friend, whether they're toxic or not, doesn't have to define you. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but sometimes we make all these excuses and do a bunch of mental gymnastics to try to justify being in a toxic situation, when ultimately the way that you feel with this person is not healthy. And it's interesting to me the way that we'll make excuses for a less than ideal situation when we have plenty of other examples of healthy friendships and relationships that we don't need to make these sacrifices in. So why should you have to do that for this other person? Because even if that person is, struggling with something or having mental health issues, at the end of the day, like, you cannot control somebody else's behavior. And I think it's really difficult when you're friends with someone who's kind of narcissistic or self-destructive. You feel like you have to save them, but you can't really do that. Like, at some point, everybody has to be responsible for their own choices, and everybody's threshold for bullshit is different. So, like, sometimes you can be friends with somebody who's self-destructive, but they have the awareness around their own self-destruction that they won't drag you down with them. But anybody that is trying to make you feel guilty for wanting to live your authentic life and be who you are, just so that you can make them comfortable, like, that isn't somebody that is extending themselves for your spiritual growth. Like, that's not built on a foundation of love. Maybe they feel love for you, but ultimately they're not willing to take responsibility for their own actions and are instead wanting you to take responsibility for them. And we are not about that shit. So sometimes you just need to recognize that you can still love somebody who isn't right for you. You know, like I always talk about how connection and compatibility don't always overlap the way that we want to. And it is really difficult to kind of like watch a car crash in slow motion, basically, when you're friends with somebody and when you care about somebody who is just a little bit out of control and not able to take responsibility for it. But it doesn't mean that you have to get in the car with them. You know what I mean? And sometimes I think you can separate for a bit. That person needs to go through it and hit their rock bottom, and then maybe you can meet at a different point. But sometimes you just have to let go and allow that person to make their own mistakes. You don't have to go through it with them. That's a dynamic that I have seen a lot of. And it's either that or people that are friends with you but are kind of jealous of you at the same time. And that again is their own selfishness and has nothing to do with necessarily practicing love. They're not extending themselves for your spiritual growth to share a reality with you. They just want you to bend to their expectations of what reality should look like for them. That's no real love, my G. So, yeah, I think another thing is that when you go through a friend breakup, you know, even if somebody didn't treat you well, it doesn't mean that you can't still mourn the friendship. You know, grief is grief, and you should let yourself feel sad for the space that has been left where this person was, and do whatever you can, whatever you need to take time to heal and mourn, and know that sometimes you need to let go of something in order to make room for something better to come along. Different stages of our lives require different sorts of relationships, and I think the most fulfilling relationships are the ones that you can carry through all different stages of your life. But some relationships are, you know, just there for a season, and that's okay. And everything is just about coming into acceptance, I think. First, you have to come into acceptance, and then you can think about what action you can take, if any, to, you know, move into the next stage. Sometimes it's just a waiting game and creating space and focusing on yourself and focusing on the other friendships that you have that are healthier, or focusing on creating healthier friendships, learning how to draw better boundaries. I think friend breakups teach you that as well. Like, okay, this person was stepping over this boundary that I wanted to keep, and I was making exceptions for them. And now I know next time, anytime I see this behavior again, that I need to draw a harder boundary. And you won't be tested again until you're in another place of like conflict or disagreement. And I think that's really important to remember too, because it's one thing for everything to be going smoothly and everything's like great, etc. You're not really being tested in those situations. Only when shit hits a fan do you really find out if you've made progress or not, in the way that you see yourself, in the way that you see the world, in the way that you behave. So developing awareness around that anytime you're faced with another difficult person, because just because you've cut a negative person out of your life doesn't mean another one isn't going to come along. And when that next person comes, that's when what you've learned from that previous friendship is supposed to kick in and tell you, okay, this is a red flag. I have learned that from this other experience, instead of doing what I would usually do, which is make excuses or go out of my way for someone who ultimately makes me feel like trash. I need to set a hard boundary in my mind and just be firm in the way that I approach this, so that I'm not spiraling out of control again. Like, I think sometimes we think so narrowly. It's like, okay, yes, I finally cut this person out. Now everything's going to be fine. No, you need to understand that shit is always going to hit the fan. That's just life. And it doesn't matter if it's your love life, your friendships, your family, your work, society at large, whatever. Everything is trending towards chaos, and life is cyclical most of the time. You're up, then you're down, then you're up again, then you're down again, and you're up again. And the only thing that really changes is the speed at which we move in an upwards direction and a downward direction. Sometimes it's a slow burn up. Sometimes you're shooting into ecstasy. Sometimes it's just like slowly you're realizing that your life is falling apart. And other times a pandemic hits and everything that you thought you knew is no longer true. So I think, yes, main takeaway, what did you learn from this relationship and this person, and how could you better handle it if somebody like that comes into your life again? Because I can almost guarantee you they will. Lots of shitty people exist. Okay, everybody's bar for what is shitty is different. So know what that is for yourself and move into your future with a little more wisdom, and protect the friends that you do love and care about and mutually support at all costs. Okay, it's one of the most important parts of being a person is the connections that you create with the people that you love. So I think that's all I have to say for now on this topic. Thank you for listening, and let me know what you think. I hope everybody is doing okay. If you're not doing okay, remember that progress is not always going to be linear. And think about the times when you've been having a shit time, or you had a shit time and you came out of it with a little more wisdom. Build more awareness around your thoughts and your feelings, and do whatever you need to do to process them. I think everybody assumes that it's like, okay, yeah, I had this feeling, I had that thought, la-di-da, let's move on. But like, if you need to sit down, write everything out, type it in your computer, scream into a pillow, I don't know, scream off a cliff, don't jump though, do it. You know, if you need to meditate, do it. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Whatever you need to do to maintain peace in your mind, to stay present. Please pursue and do, and be as consistent as you can, because that's when you're going to see the most benefits. So yes, you can hit me up on Instagram at amberkiller, at friend.crush, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.